Hi, my name is Reverend Patricia Adams Farmer, and I'm pastor of Millersburg Christian Church. The title of my sermon today on Epiphany Sunday is Epiphanies Large and Small, based on Isaiah 60, 1 through 6. In Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, the main character, Scrooge, experiences an epiphany. Scrooge begins the novel as a pessimist, a very harsh man, with no sympathy for others. And then on Christmas Eve, he is led through the past, present, and future by three scary ghosts who show him the effects of his attitude on all the people in the community. Well, as a result of his journey, Scrooge has an epiphany that he no longer wants to live as he has been, and his life was transformed, and everyone around him was transformed. And as we all know, especially Tiny Tim. Well, in stories and literature, an epiphany is the sudden awareness or realization that a character gains through an experience. Many times that change is like Mr. Scrooge, a movement towards spiritual growth and positive change. For Scrooge, his epiphany led to a 180-degree turn from meanness to kindness, from greed to gratitude, from darkness to light. But epiphanies are not just for fictional stories. We all have them. They may not be as dramatic as Scrooge's, but they involve some important part of our life. A man who has been working long hours at a corporate job has missed another one of his daughter's volleyball games. When he gets home late at night, his daughter tells him that this was the game where she was recognized for earning a scholarship. The father, who feels terrible, has an epiphany that work shouldn't come before family and makes every one of her games the rest of the year. At an AA meeting, a mother shares her experience with alcoholism and how she lost her children to foster care due to that addiction. Another woman in the support group has an epiphany during this speech and realizes that she doesn't want to lose her family to this disease and is dedicated to her recovery. In these examples of real-life epiphanies, it is always moving from darkness in one part of our life to light. It is, as Isaiah said, "Arise, shine, for the glory of the Lord has risen upon you." In our church life, we celebrate Epiphany as a season of moving toward light. That is, we celebrate the wise men following the Christmas star of Bethlehem. Let's think about these wise men for a moment. I wonder what they saw in the sky that first night. What was it that captured their imagination? What was it that motivated them to pack and begin a journey to who knows where? Something had been revealed to them in the form of an epiphany. But what was it? Was it in the sky, in their mind, in their heart? We don't have much historical information about these wise men and their journey. Matthew says they came from the east, and some have speculated they were from Persia. We like to think that there were 3 of them, but Matthew doesn't say that, and the number is varied throughout the church's history. 2, 3, 4, 8, even 12. Traditionists call them Casper, Melchior, and Balthazar. Now, but those names didn't come about until the 7th century, so they're just tradition. And what about the star? It has been viewed as a supernatural phenomenon, or it has also been seen as a regular star. It's been seen as a comet, or sometimes as a conjunction of planets, much like the great conjunction we just witnessed this Christmas when Jupiter and Saturn were closely aligned. They call that the Christmas star, the Bethlehem star. Well, this anonymity and lack of historical information is a reminder that this story, this epiphany journey, is not just the wise men's journey, it is everyone's journey. I don't know what was in the sky, what they saw that first night. I don't know what was in their minds, what they thought, asked, or talked about. I don't know what was in their hearts, what they felt, dreamed, or longed for. But I know that there have been times when we each have experienced epiphany. times when our night sky has been lit brightly, times when our minds have been illumined, times when our hearts have been enlightened, and sometimes changed dramatically. Epiphany is a time when something calls us, moves us to a new place, and sometimes we see the face of God in a new way, in a human way, in our lives here and now. And that's what happened to the wise men. They began to see and hear stories of the newborn king, and something stirred within them, and they began to wonder, to imagine that their lives were part of this much larger story. Could it be that the one who created life, who hung the stars in the sky, noticed them, knew them, lived within them, and was calling them? Could it be that the light they saw in the sky was a reflection of the divine light that burned within them, that burns within each one of us? To seriously consider these questions is to begin the journey. That journey took the wise men to the house where they found the answer to their questions in the arms of his mother Mary. We may travel a different route than the wise men, but the answer is still the same. Yes, God notices us. Yes, God knows us, lives within us, and calls us. God is continually revealing God's self in and through humanity and in all creation, in flesh. Maybe it was the day that you bathed your first grandchild and saw the beauty of creation and the love of the Creator. Or that day you said, "I love you," and knew that it was about more than just romance or physical attraction. Perhaps it was the moment you really believed your life was sacred, holy, and acceptable to God. Maybe it was the time you kept vigil at the bedside of one who was dying, and you experienced the joy that death is not the end. These are the stories of our lives, epiphanies that forever change who we are, how we live, and the road we travel. They are moments of ordinary, everyday life in which divinity is revealed in humanity, and we see God's glory face to face. My own epiphany of seeing God's glory in a new way happened in my 30s, when after a lifetime of wrestling with the idea of God, I discovered that God is not a big policeman in the sky just waiting for us to trip up. God is not a puppeteer pulling our strings or a bearded man with a bad temper. When it finally dawned on me that God was love, when I realized that love is the light that burns within each of us, and that light gives us hope for ourselves and our world, then I became a true follower of Jesus, who is the light of the world. That's when I decided to become a minister. Celebrated journalist and a person of deep faith, Maria Shriver, writes to her readers about her own epiphany of living through this past year with the pandemic. She says, "COVID has felt like a level 5 tornado. It has wreaked havoc and caused so much destruction, physical, mental, financial, and spiritual destruction. It has ripped up families, relationships, and careers to the point where I think we are all now standing in some kind of rubble." She continues, "As I write that line, my eyes well with tears. I can feel my heart cracking. I finally welcome the fact that I can feel how tender and fragile my heart is right now. I'm sure yours is too. I close my eyes and I let out a huge sigh. I take a deep breath. What a year this has been. None of us could have seen it coming. Not you, not me. And yet, here we are, standing in our rubble as we look ahead towards 2021. At this time of year," she says, "I usually have all kinds of professional goals for the new year. I usually write down what I want to leave behind and what I want to carry over. But as I reflect at the end of this year, as I reassess and survey my own rubble, I have decided to relieve myself of my usual goals that I want to accomplish. If I've learned anything this year, and in this life of mine as a whole, it's that accepting and surrendering to God's will and God's time, well, that's something I need to get better at. And so as I look ahead to this week and this new year ahead, my intention is to simply stay open. Simply stay hopeful and stay grateful. I say simply, but I know it won't be simple. It's really hard for me to stay open. It's hard for me to stay vulnerable and accept what is. Moving forward, though, she says, whenever I feel myself going down a dark hole, and sometimes I do, I'm going to reach out for help. I'm going to ask a few friends to hold me accountable. I'm going to put my own personal growth at the top of my list, and I'm going to check it twice. I'm going to practice being open to widening my gaze, widening my heart, and dropping that critical voice that challenges what I deserve and the storyline I want for myself. Although Schreiber does not use the word epiphany, her story is exactly that, a time of revelation, a life-changing insight out of the rubble of the pandemic, a movement of spiritual growth that widens her soul to include just a little more light than before. And in this new year, as we ponder the pain and darkness we have experienced this past year, and our country has experienced, may we dare to do a little stargazing, a little introspection, and open ourselves to the light of Christ, to fresh possibilities, to a wider scope, to epiphanies large and small. For as John says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. Amen.